Good morning, everyone. I'm David Barish, Chairman of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. If you haven't already, as always, I ask people to turn off their electronic devices, at least in terms of sound. Keep them on silent. With us today, morning Fred Strathmeyer, representing Russell Redding, Secretary of the Department of Agriculture. Jennifer Langen, representing Joe Torcella, State Treasurer, and Kristen Heidingsfelder, representing Secretary of Revenue Dan Hassel. Thank you all for coming and for your participation. A quorum of the board members being present, I will call the proceedings to order. First order of business, the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. By way of preliminary announcements, the board held an executive session yesterday, Tuesday, June 11th, to discuss personnel matters and to conduct quasi-judicial deliberations relating to matters that are coming before the board. Our first order of business today is a short presentation from Sugar House. You guys want to come forward to give us an update? Since we're not contemplating any action at this time, there's no need for anybody to be sworn, but I would ask that anybody's going to speak to state and spell your name for the court reporter. Please begin.
Presentation up.
It's up here. Okay, we're
Terrific. Good morning, Chairman Barish and members of the board, Mr. O'Toole and members of staff. I am Laura McAllister Cox, Vice President of Regulatory and Compliance and Legal Counsel of Rush Street Gaming. And with me this morning, I have Joe Sciabetta, our Vice President of Development and Operations from Rush Street Gaming. And also, I'm pleased to introduce Rob Long, General Manager of Sugar House Casino. Rob comes to us with a very diverse background, having been in law enforcement, having been a gaming regulator in Nevada, and a longtime member of the Rush Street Gaming family working on our projects in Mississippi and upstate New York. We're thrilled to have him as part of our team in Philadelphia. So I'm sure it comes as no surprise to you, there's never been a more exciting time in gaming with what's happening, and Philadelphia is a bright, shining example of this. We appreciate your busy agenda today and only want to take a few minutes to make you aware of some important upcoming events in Philadelphia. So I'm going to first turn it over to Joe to set the stage a bit.
Good morning. Joe Sciabetta. I'll spell it S as in Sam, C as in Charlie, I as in India, B as in boy, E as in Edward, T as in Tom, T as in Tom, A as in Apple. As Laura said, I'm Vice President of Development Operations for Rush Street Gaming. I joined in 2009, right after we broke ground in Philadelphia on the old Jack Frost site, which is part of the reason the name Sugar House was derived by the ownership group. And the property has certainly been a shining star in Fishtown and has done a great job at really taking the gaming environment and the entertainment to a new level in the area. The building was built in an interim phase because of the Great Recession, and following our opening in 2010, we came and did a $164 million expansion where we added an event center, a parking garage, more restaurants, and more gaming positions to the property. That has been very well received. We've done a great job. We've followed since with our temporary sports book, which opened up first in the Commonwealth in Philadelphia, along with our sister property in Pittsburgh. We were very successful there. And the online gaming has now launched for the sports mobile betting with PlaySugarHouse.com. So the history of the property has been very well received. At the same time, Rush Street has really grown as a company and really grown the Rivers brand. After we opened Sugar House, we opened Rivers Casino and Displays, which has been very successful. And we took the name from Pittsburgh because we wanted to start building a brand. We then won a casino license in upstate New York, and we continued to keep the Rivers brand alive and really started to grow it as a brand. And ownership felt it was time to take all the good stuff that has been happening in Philadelphia and bring Philadelphia into the fold of the Rivers brand.
We'll turn it over to Rob.
So we are rebranding to Rivers Casino Philadelphia. As you know, continuously improving customer experiences is a shared goal of the PGCB and Rush Street. As gaming now becomes a 360-degree experience, land-based, mobile, and online, a unified brand for Rush Street's Pennsylvania properties will best serve the Commonwealth, host communities, our guests, and our team members. Our long-term plan is to establish continuity across Rush Street's Pennsylvania properties, sports books, iGaming, and guest rewards programs. This rebranding represents a $15 million reinvestment in the property, and all changes to the facility will be completed by local companies and contractors. The evolution of this rebranding will roll out in phases. Proactive communications to our team, which will begin after we return from the meeting here today. Then the physical transformation of the property, signage, logos, etc. Redesign of gaming pieces, meaning chips, cards, and dice. Additional consideration of select modification of Rivers Casino Pittsburgh brand to include the city designation so as not to have the two confused. And updated internal controls pending PGCB review and approval. The timeline for this is today we are announcing the intention to rebrand. In early summer, the property transformation begins, including internal controls, gaming items, that sort of thing. In midsummer, we plan to launch iGaming. By the end of summer, we'll launch an expanded permanent sports book that will be built this summer. And in this fall, we'll do the formal ceremonial Rivers Casino Philadelphia launch.
And so there you have it, our standardized Rivers Casino brand across the Rush Street properties. And if you have any questions, we're happy to answer.
Thank you. At the moment, are there any questions from the board at this time? Enforcement Council, have any comments or questions?
Anything that helps the industry is good for me.
Okay. Thank you very much for being
Thank
here
you
this
very
morning.
much.
Next, we have two public hearings scheduled. The first one involves the application for a Cat 4 license for Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association, which hopes to construct a Hollywood casino in Morgantown, Pennsylvania. Can the applicants please come forward? Before we begin, as you're getting settled,
Do we need one more chair?
I'd like to note that the purpose of the proceeding today is to allow the board to hear from the applicant and our Office of Enforcement Counsel as to the viability of this project and the suitability of the applicant, which is becoming before the board today pursuant to the provisions of the Pennsylvania Racehorse Development and Gaming Act. In advance of the meeting, the application and proposal submitted have been reviewed and vetted by the Bureau of Licensing and the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement, including the Financial Investigations Unit and the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Those bureaus have prepared investigative reports and a suitability report, which was provided to the board in advance of this meeting. Additionally, the entire record in this process, including all the public comment received, whether it was in writing or provided orally at the public input hearing on March 4th, 2019 in Morgantown, have been transcribed and have been made available to my fellow board members. I'd also note that for the record that the March 4th public input hearing had more than 47 local government officials, community groups, and individuals who were given the opportunity to express their views to this board. Truly, everybody who wanted to be heard for or against this project and the applicant has been given the opportunity to be heard previously, and I can assure you that the board has considered the various views throughout this process. With that by way of background, I would like to ask everybody who's going to speak to please state and spell their names for the court reporter prior to your presentation. And additionally, I would ask that all non-attorney witnesses please stand to be sworn at this time. You may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the commission. Adrian King here, that's A-D-R-I-A-N, King, K-I-N-G, from the Ballard Spar firm, here on behalf of Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association. Before we, well, let me first just introduce who we have here speaking before you today. I think that'll be the best way to start. John Finnemore, who some of you have seen before, Senior Vice President for Regional Operations at Penn National Gaming. Chris Rogers, to his right, Senior Vice President for Corporate Development. And then to Chris's right, Dan Ime, who's Vice President and General Manager of Hollywood Casino in Grantville. Also, having been sworn in, you may have seen him as Dan DeSario. And Dan is a principal and vice president at Langen Engineering and Environmental Services. Dan's going to give some brief testimony on some traffic issues. And also, I wanted to just acknowledge in the room, and if they might just gesture, from Carnarvon Township, our host community, Alan Steyer, the chairman of the Board of Supervisors, Jack Hess, member of the Board of Supervisors, John Scalia, the chief of police, Joan Baer, the township administrator, and also Eric Brown, the township solicitor, is here as well. If you'll indulge me, Mr. Chairman, just wanted to maybe lay out how we intended to present our evidence, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
Fine.
Typically, we've mainly just focused on doing a PowerPoint. In this presentation, just to anticipate some questions that you may have, there will be a PowerPoint, again, giving an overview of the project. I then intend to put on some brief testimony from Mr. DeSario, again, on the traffic issues. And then I'm going to present to you and seek admission some additional documentary evidence for the record. And I may just explain a couple of those documents and hand them up for your consideration during your deliberation. You can ask, obviously, questions at any point, or we can wait to the end. I leave that up to you, but I just wanted to let you know kind of where we wanted to go with this. If that's
But we'll see how that develops. You've laid out a good plan.
okay, thank you. So let's click through here, and I'm going to turn it over to John. John?
Thank you. Thanks, Adrian. Good morning. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, and staff, John Finnemore, Johnfinamore, Senior Vice President, Regional Operations for Penn National Gaming. Considering that you've seen this presentation a couple of times before, and in the interest of time, we will move briskly through it this morning. But just starting out with the basic history lesson on Penn National one more time. As you know, started as a single racetrack operation in 1972 outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And from those humble beginnings, this company today operates 42 properties, not including obviously the 2 Cat 4s in Pennsylvania, in 19 jurisdictions. We're the largest operator of regional casinos in the country. We're also the largest operator of pari-mutuel facilities in the country. And through all that, we're still headquartered in Wyomissing, Pennsylvania, the only publicly traded company headquartered in PA, as you know. Today, the company looks very different. Over $5 billion in annual revenues with 30,000 plus employees. And again, quite a growth story from the beginnings in 1972.
Next slide.
Just wish. Let me click it one more. We've been, over those years, very active in the community in Berks County. These are just some of the many organizations that we have been involved with, actively involved as board members for these organizations. Our employees have literally contributed millions of dollars over the years to these organizations within Berks County, and we're very proud of our involvement in the community. Our core values, very quickly, these are our company-wide core values: to provide an unparalleled guest experience, work happy, commitment to diversity, commitment to the community, as I just touched on, and commitment to responsible gaming. And then just a little background on our flagship namesake property, Hollywood Casino at Penn National Racecourse. As I mentioned earlier, it opened in 1972, but since that time, the company's invested over $400 million in the property, which opened as a casino in 2008. Today we have 907 team members. There's our game count: 2,002 slots and 75 tables. And I think this next bullet is a significant and impressive one. That since 2008, the property has paid $1.6 billion in taxes and fees to the Commonwealth and to the local communities. 156, as you see, is the local share assessment. In addition, $338 million in salaries, wages, and benefits, excuse me, has been paid out. And our annual local and state vendor spend runs about $13 million. Community involvement is very significant for us at the Grantville property as well. These are a few of the organizations that this property and their team members are associated with, starting with the $3.75 million that has been raised over the years for IBD research at the Milton Hershey Medical Center. And again, at the property, $1.32 million has been raised to local and regional charities, or donated to local and regional charities. And the American Cancer Society Relay for Life is a large Penn corporate charitable initiative. Certainly our property supports it as well, to the tune of $100,000. With that, I'll turn it over to Chris Rogers, our Senior Vice President of Corporate Development. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Good morning. It's Chris Rogers, CHRIS ROGERS. And I'm really excited today to talk to you about the development of Hollywood Casino Morgantown, which we believe is an ideal Category 4 casino, a brand new state-of-the-art facility, and an excellent location that we think will address an underserved gaming market. First, a little background. As you know, we won the 5th auction back in April last year for $7.5 million and selected our 15-mile territory centered in West Calico Township. Very quickly honed in on Carnarvon Township as our preferred site, and we're very fortunate to have found an undeveloped but improved site right at the intersection of I-76 and 176 in Carnarvon Township for our development. We then submitted our gaming application to the Gaming Control Board on October 31st and had our public input hearing on March 4th, 2019. You can see on the next slide an overhead shot of our site. This really emphasizes how ideally placed this is in relation to I-76 and 176. We're right in that corridor, and we anticipate a vast majority of the customers' visitation to our property will come via 76 and 176. Moving on to the site plan, you can see the proposed Greenfield Casino. So we're building from the ground up a brand new state-of-the-art casino, surrounded by parking and green areas that will act as further buffer between the casino and the local surrounding areas. Moving inside, we have 2 main entrances. The first on the north side is where our porte cochere will be. On the west, you can see the secondary entrance. Both of those entrances flow right into the gaming floor, with the table game pit right in the center, surrounded by slot machines on all sides. The pink represents the sports and race book. We are in the process of applying with the Racing Commission to relocate one of our OTW non-primary locations to Hollywood Casino at Morgantown, which would provide us the opportunity to offer an integrated sports and race book right there adjacent to the gaming floor, which we think is going to be a spectacular amenity for our customers there. You can see on the east side, there is a food hall with a bar there with a couple of different food options. And on the south side, that is our signature restaurant with bar and an entertainment area. Moving on to transportation. It's important to note this site that we selected was initially planned and designed to support a 200,000 square foot mixed-use retail development. Our proposed development is obviously significantly smaller than that at under 86,000 square feet. We did have Langdon Engineering analyze the anticipated traffic to the casino at 11 nearby intersections. And their conclusion was that the anticipated traffic to the casino is much less than the prior development, and certainly the adjacent road network has sufficient capacity to accommodate the site generation from this project. We also studied, along with our advisors, other potential impacts on the local municipalities, including street maintenance, utilities, public safety, and in each instance, the impacts of the development were deemed to be negligible. I want to point out, I'm sure you've seen a lot of the very small but vocal opposition to this project. That opposition has largely and vastly from outside of Carnarvon Township. I want to emphasize that the Township of Carnarvon has been nothing but supportive for this project. And in fact, we received unanimous approval from the Board of Supervisors for our development plan on March 12th, 2019. Next, I'd like to address some of the economic impact of just the development construction part of this project. 275 direct construction jobs, over $50 million of direct upfront construction expenditures. Total impact to the surrounding area of $50 million to Carnarvon, $83 million to Berks County, and over $100 million to Pennsylvania. So I'd like to close by saying, although this project is small in scale compared to something like Hollywood Casino Penn National Racecourse, we believe this project is going to have a very meaningful impact on the local municipality from both a jobs creation and economic development perspective. And with that, I will turn it over to Dan Ime, the General Manager of Penn National Racecourse, to talk about the operations.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, and PGCB staff. My name is Dan Ime, that's I-H-M, and I'm the Vice President and General Manager for Hollywood Casino at Penn National Racecourse. So as Chris ended his conversation regarding the employment opportunities, we will be looking at hiring approximately 250 direct full-time equivalent positions. We will strive, obviously, to hire as many local residents as possible. For example, in Grantville, we actually hire 31% of our workforce comes from East Hanover Township. On the right, you'll see where some of that staffing will reside. Gaming, obviously, is the highest percentage at 42%. That will be serving 750 slots and 30 table games. Next, with our food outlets, we have the food and beverage at 22.7%. And then obviously, security and surveillance, we will obviously meet or exceed the PGCB requirements for staffing levels in those areas. As far as benefits, we have a very comprehensive benefit plan for Morgantown, very similar to what we have at Hollywood Grantville. We'll offer 401k, medical, dental, paid time off, the bonus program, which is actually a quarterly guest service program for our team members. Tuition reimbursement, right now that is set for undergraduates receive $2,500 per year, and graduate students can receive up to $5,000 per year to advance their studies. Professional development and free table game dealer training. Now that training will also have for Morgantown. It's a 6-week program, and to give you an idea, currently in Grantville, our dealers are making approximately a little over $20 an hour. And obviously representatives of the community, and we'll continue that as we do in Grantville. Our staff, our leadership will be involved in community events, and we'll also serve on boards, church groups, and non-for-profits. Going into very important aspects, social responsibility. Penn National takes social responsibility very seriously in all of its jurisdictions. We spend thousands of dollars annually on compulsive and problem gambling initiatives. The training starts as team members are first hired on, and then it's annual afterwards. Doesn't stop there. We have roundtable quarterly knowledge checks that happens throughout the year. Daily pre-shift discussions within all of our team members talking about responsible gaming. As you know, we have a state-of-the-art verification system, Veridocs. That system is used to look at and verify underage or self-excluded patrons. So in Morgantown, when we adopt that system, we will take all of the PA state self-exclusion lists that will be populated into the Veridocs system. As well as, in addition to, is the Penn National Gaming. So with all of our jurisdictions, anybody that's self-excluded within Penn National Gaming in every state will also be populated within the Morgantown self-excluded list. Also, to help keep any underage from coming in, we have an incentive program to our security officers. We paid over $95,000 to our officers, and that's really, it's a 100 for 100 program. So if they go 100 days without having any minor incidents through the entrance to the casino, every security officer gets $100. And then obviously we have all of our advertising that we'll be using for Morgantown. The display must be 21, as well as the problem gambling hotline, which is the 800 Gambler. Moving on to the impact. I know Chris talked about the impact for development. So on an operations standpoint, direct, indirect, and induced, Carnarvon will receive an initial impact, $73 million, supporting 276 jobs and $8.5 million in earnings, $1.6 million in personal income, sales, and business tax. And then you can see upon stabilization, those numbers go up. $94.3 million to Carnarvon and $1.9 million for personal income, sales, and business tax. On the local impact, Carnarvon Township, very important, approximately $1.6 million annually in new revenues will be received for Carnarvon Township upon stabilization. Those revenues come from the 2% on the revenue for slots and 1% for table game revenue. And public safety, very important. In terms of the property public safety, I know we've discussed this in the past, but we will have obviously well-lit service parking areas, surveillance both in the parking areas as well as the casino. We're estimating a little over 800 cameras. And then security, which is roaming the parking areas as well as the casino floor. I know John is here from the Chief of Police for Carnarvon, but we've had the opportunity to meet with John and also give John a tour of the facility and show him some of our operations and how things work in the Grantville facility. We also did the same for Jason, who is the fire chief for Carnarvon Township. We work very closely with those groups. In fact, it's something that will probably continue throughout in Carnarvon Township, but in Grantville, we meet with the fire chief annually every year, and we look at the equipment needs. So we donate thousands of dollars, between $10,000 to $20,000 a year, to the Grantville Fire Department in excess of what they currently receive, just to help maintain their equipment so they can better serve the communities. And as far as local outreach, currently with Carnarvon Township, as a company, we've met and presented to the Morgantown Area Business Association, Twin Valley Rotary, and Twin Valley Youth Soccer Organization. We met with the Heritage Restaurant owners. We've also met with the County Workforce Development Board to discuss plans to identify, train, and employ local residents. And then most recently, we just contributed $5,000 to Carnarvon Township for tornado cleanup efforts. So in summary, Penn National is a highly reputable entertainment company and creates and operates high-quality facilities in 19 different jurisdictions. We have a proven record of civic and charitable involvement in Berks County. Significant improvement in Carnarvon-Morgantown area. We'll be spending a little over $111 million. Creation of approximately 250 permanent jobs and 275 construction jobs, targeting winter of 2020. Minimal impacts and costs to the township. $1.6 million annually, and that's new tax revenues for Carnarvon Township. And then a strong local support from the Board of Supervisors. So with that, I conclude the PowerPoint presentation and turn it over to Adrian.
Great, thanks, Dan. And if I could impose on one of you to give up your seat temporarily to Dan, I'd appreciate that. Morning, Dan.
Good morning.
Could you briefly just spell your name and introduce yourself?
Certainly, for the record, my name is Dan Disario. Last name is Disario. I'm a principal with the firm Langen Engineering, and I oversee all the traffic and transportation services at our firm.
Okay. And again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you already have in the record the Langen Engineering traffic study and report that was submitted as part of the application. And in supplementation of that, I'm offering this testimony. Dan, could you just briefly talk about your qualifications?
Certainly, I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. I'm also a certified professional traffic operations engineer, which is a national certification by way of examination. As it relates to casino-specific experience, I was on the team that was an unsuccessful bidder for one of the licenses down in Philly. The team that I was on was Casino Revolution, which was the site just east of the stadium area. So we lost out to the one that was in the stadium area. I've also worked on the Parks casino expansion, expansions over the years. And I've also done significant work with casinos in Atlantic City and New Jersey.
What is the total length of your time in your profession?
I'm going on 27 years in September.
Right. Mr. Chairman and Office of Enforcement Counsel, if there's no objection, I would like to have Mr. Desario accepted as a traffic engineering expert.
That's fine.
No objection.
Thank you.
All right. Dan, can you tell us about the scope of your engagement by Penn National and what were you asked to do with respect to the proposed Morgantown casino?
Certainly, and I will be brief. Essentially, we were asked to do a transportation impact study to identify the traffic impacts that would be associated with the proposed casino that's before you. As the board, as well as the public, is aware, the site is situated, in my opinion, as it relates to site access, in an ideal location, being that it's adjacent to the Pennsylvania Turnpike at its interchange with 176, and it fronts along Morgantown Road.
Okay. And you prepared the study that we've submitted to the board?
Yes.
Okay. Did you make an assessment of the casino's impact on the local road network?
Yes, I did. And as the board heard from some of the earlier testimony, and it's also identified in our traffic study, the majority of the traffic associated with the proposed casino is expected to be oriented to the interstate system, both along the PA Turnpike as well as 176. In addition, I'm sure as the board's aware, most casinos, their peak times of activity occur outside of typical commuter times. And in particular, Friday evenings and Saturday evenings are the times when casinos generate the most traffic because of the activity of patrons coming to their facilities. So in terms of compatibility to surrounding road network, the proposed casino that's before you will have very little traffic impact during commute times, in particular during the weekday evening commute time. It's later in the evening, particularly on Fridays and Saturdays, when the proposed casino will generate its highest traffic. And based on the study that we've put forth, in terms of traffic impacts, particularly to the surrounding local roads, we've identified that this proposed casino will not significantly impact those roadways and existing operations by and large will remain largely unchanged in terms of, I would respectfully submit to you, there won't be any discernible or noticeable changes in operations to the local road network because of this proposed casino project.
And in terms of trip generation, you're aware, and you've heard testimony today, and I think it's addressed in your report, that this site had previously been targeted for a large mall-type project. I think we heard 200,000 square feet. I believe it was called the Tri-County Mall.
Yes, and based on our research, I think it was more on the order of 300,000 square feet. It was a mixed-use development with retail, office, as well as restaurants.
Okay. And compared to that project and the traffic that was projected for that project, how does that compare to what you have projected for the casino?
So if you look at a Friday evening commute time, so when people are coming home from work, so generally 1 hour between 4 and 6 in the evening, the previously approved mixed-use development for this site would generate 900 new trips. So a total of 900 trips coming in and out of this site would have been generated by that mixed-use development. In comparison, the proposed casino that's before you, during that same time, 1 hour between 4 and 6, would generate, round numbers, 225 trips. So the casino that's before you would generate about 75% less traffic than the existing approvals for this site for the previously proposed mixed-use development.
Just to clarify, just make sure we're clear, you're talking about during those peak driving hours.
Correct.
Not suggesting that I would think Penn National wouldn't be terribly interested in siting a casino if the net impact was 225 trips or whatever. When you spread it out over the day, I obviously get a very different profile, wouldn't you?
You would, but I would respectfully submit to you, Mr. Chairman, that in terms of the mixed-use development on a daily basis, that development would generate more traffic as well compared to the proposed casino that's before you.
Just want to make sure the record's clear.
And I think that's a good point. Just to clarify, when you're looking at traffic impacts on existing road networks, the times where those road networks will have their highest volumes, by and large, are during the commute times, particularly during weekdays. Those times are very sensitive to additional traffic and changing of traffic operations. And this casino project, compared to the previously mixed-use development, far and away is a better land use for this site than the previously approved mixed-use development from a pure traffic impact perspective.
Please proceed. I just wanted to get that on the record.
Two more questions. At the public input hearing for the casino project, the issue of whether or not the casino will impact traffic on 4 local highways in Nantmeal Township and Elverson Borough, and specifically those 4 being PA Route 23, PA Route 401, PA Route 82, and Little Conestoga Road was raised. In your opinion, will the casino facility have a negative impact on traffic on these roads in those areas? Again, Nantmeal Township and Elverson Borough.
In my opinion, I do not think this casino project will have any significant impact on those roads. They all exist to the east of the site. Any traffic attributed to the casino that would use those roads would be from the residents that live in those areas using those local roads to get to the site. We've identified about 60% of the traffic for the casino using the interstate system. Talking with the gentleman from Penn National, they believe that number is actually going to be higher. So our report, as submitted to you, I believe overstates the impacts to the local roads. And even with that overstatement, our conclusion was that there will be no significant impact as it relates to traffic along those adjacent local roads.
Okay. And last question. To the extent that tolls would increase on the PA Turnpike, do you have any thoughts as to whether casino patrons will be traveling on local roads to avoid tolls?
In my opinion, I do not believe any increase in the tolls along the PA Turnpike, would cause anyone to divert off the turnpike onto the local road system to get to this particular site to save whatever that incremental increase in toll would be. Everyone drives the PA Turnpike. The interchanges are spaced very far apart. So in order to divert onto a local road, if you're coming, say, from the Philly area and heading west on the Turnpike, you would be inconvenienced in terms of the amount of additional travel time that you would have to incur to get off the Turnpike to travel on these adjacent roads to save a increased toll charge. So in my opinion, because it's much quicker to travel to the site by staying on the interstate system, particularly the PA Turnpike, I think the increase in tolls will have no bearing on how traffic would access the site.
I'm going to get into documentary evidence. It may make sense maybe to pause for a second and to see if the board or OEC has any questions for Dan before
That's what I'm gonna do
leaves.
before you go further. It's a little bit different than we normally do it. Cyrus, if there are specific crossing examination questions that your staff or you have, this would be the time to ask of this witness.
Okay. Yes. The only question I have is if you could break down percentage-wise, what percentage do you expect number of the patrons that will use the Turnpike, will use 176, and will use the local roadways to get to the casino?
So based on our study, we estimate 19% will use the PA Turnpike tuned from the east, 7% tuned from the west, and then 176 tuned from the north, oriented towards Reading, 35%. So if you add those three up, it's 61% would be using the interstate system, 39% would be using the local road system. However, as I testified previously, the representatives of Penn National think there will be even a higher draw along the PA Turnpike, particularly tuned from the east. So I would respectfully submit to you, I think our traffic study overstates the impacts along the adjacent roads. And even with that overstatement, we identified that the local roads would not be impacted significantly with this project.
With regard to the 39% utilizing the local roadways, what roadways, do you have an assessment as to what particular roadways those local, that 39% would utilize?
Yes, we looked at, or we've identified that along Main Street, which is south of the site, 13% tuned from the east, 13% tuned from the west. Mill Road, which basically Morgantown Road comes into as you head south of the site, 2%, so 2% tuned from the south along Mill. And the balance would be along Morgantown / Reading Road, which would be 11% tuned from the east.
Okay, and if Penn National could respond with regard to the percentages as they see those patrons accessing the casino.
Sure. When you look at the feeder markets for this property, we believe for it to be successful, it's going to be primarily from the Reading area, so that's north, obviously, and heading south on 176. And the other main feeder market we assume will be the Philly area, so to the east. And when we looked at the data, we felt that those numbers were a little understated because if we're successful, if our marketing programs are successful, we will drive business from those two main feeder markets. We already know the Reading market quite well because it is a major feeder market for the Grantville property, so we're well aware of that market, the strengths of that market, and indeed a lot of the players in that market already. So it gives us some confidence as to what we think will be stronger traffic counts from the east by the Turnpike and from the north via 176.
And what percentage, if you have an estimate, do you expect patrons to be in that local area that would come to your casino? That immediate Berks County, Lancaster area that would use those local roads? What percentage of your patrons do you think?
Yeah, we think that's at about 15%.
I believe also there was a recommendation with regard to a traffic light. If you guys could expand upon that a little bit.
Yes, and I'm glad you asked that question because I was negligent in my testimony to discuss that. The previous approval for the mixed-use development also had a traffic signal at the point of access along Morgantown Road as part of that project. We have engaged with PennDOT. The highway occupancy permit for that previous project is still valid because the driveway was constructed per that plan.
If I can, Adrian, can you go back while he's talking to the map that shows exactly where he's referring to, please?
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say put up the site plan, please.
Second.
Here we go. Up. One more back. Okay, so is this what you were looking for?
Yeah, that's fine.
So looking at that figure, to the upper left-hand corner is the existing driveway that was constructed as part of the previously approved mixed-use development. The highway occupancy permit that was issued for that driveway is still valid. We're in the process of working with PennDOT to change over the permittee for that permit to the new owners, which is Penn National. And we are also in discussions with them, although I can't sit here before you and absolutely guarantee it will happen, but we are in discussions with them to pursue installing the traffic signal that was part of the original approval on this site for the previous mixed-use development.
Okay. I have no further questions.
On just the subject of traffic, any questions at this point from the board? Anybody else? Go ahead.
When asked about, and Mr. King actually brought up the specific roads that were mentioned at public hearing, and you talked about them, 23, 401, 83 Little Conestoga Road. But then when you talked about the local network that you believe is going to be impacted and was part of your transportation study, you mentioned Morgantown Road, which we see here, Main Street, and Neal. Are some of those common names for these numbers, or were these numbers Route 23, 401, 82, and Little Conestoga outside of beyond what you looked at for local impact?
Some of our roads do extend into those areas. And what I can tell you is the roads that we looked at, which immediately surround the site, would experience the greatest impact because they're the closest to the site. So any traffic associated with this casino, as it gets closer to this site, will be traversing the roads and intersections that we looked at. As you get further away from the site, particularly in those areas to the east that were raised in terms of concerns, the impacts would be even less than what we've identified in our study, and the impacts that we've identified in our study for the intersections closest to the site are not significant. The only other thing I would add is that, as you heard from Penn National, there's a full expectation that more than 19% of the casino traffic would be coming to and from the east along the PA Turnpike. We've only assumed 19% for traffic study purposes. So again, this traffic study overstates how much traffic will be using the local road network, not only the intersections that surround the site, but intersections that extend beyond the site to the east in particular. And because of that, I think we overstate what the impacts are. And they weren't significant based on our analysis, and I would respectfully submit to you, as you move further away from the site, they're even less significant than we've identified.
Thank you.
I guess a comment first. The board had requested an independent review of the traffic study, just so that we could get some sort of confirmation. And PennDOT had asked McMahon Transportation Engineers and Planners to do that review. And basically, to summarize what they said, is it's their understanding that the details of this traffic study were reviewed and approved by PennDOT District 5. So do we want to wait to do that, or I just? Okay. Okay, thank you. So should I wait until that?
Well, let's just clarify.
Yeah, we do have a witness from McMahon here to testify
Okay, so-
with what their findings
I
were.
defer to my fellow commissioner. Do you-
Yeah, then I would like to ask him those questions, and then I'll just go on to Penn National's experience at Grantville, because it does seem to be a similarly sited location, even though it's not off a toll road. When you're coming off I-80, when that property was developed, were there similar concerns about local traffic? And if there were, what were the realities and the actual facts that developed out of that development?
So I was involved in the design of the casino back in the 07, 08, before it opened. I don't recall any concerns about traffic, potential increases of traffic at that time, because it was an existing facility. So I think the people who lived around, who worked around the facility, knew it had been there since 1972, and in the day it attracted 25,000 people on a race night. As many, if not more, people at one time than we see in the casino today. So there wasn't a level of concern that I recall in the local community as we designed the property. And I think, and Dan could substantiate this, I've been to that property obviously many times of the day, days of the week. Casinos are different than racetracks. They're different than football stadiums or concert venues, in that people come all at once and leave all at once for those venues, whereas the casino tends to be more of a flow basis. And frequenting the property as I do, it's rare that you see any kind of traffic activity. You have an odd car. Saturday night, certainly there is some more traffic than that, but it's very spread out, and it isn't a concentration of vehicles at any particular time. And Dan, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I completely agree, and that's even on, our busiest times, New Year's Eve, Penn Mile, and then just last weekend, the ostrich and camel races. So, and again, those are predominantly on the weekends, Friday late evening, Saturday, Sundays. So I think that's really what also helps contribute to not having any traffic issues.
And what are your race days there, other than the ostrich race days? What are the horse race days?
Our race days are typically Thursday through Saturday. And it changes a little bit. So for example, this month we added Sunday racing. Sunday racing used to be very popular for families back in the past, so we decided to bring that back to see what it did. And I think, again, it was an ostrich camel races with our thoroughbred races, but that was the busiest that we've had in years.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll wait.
Just to clarify the record, Commissioner Mustio was asking about the traffic off of I-78.
I-81.
I-81.
Did I say 80?
You said 80. I just want to make sure the record.
That's a Western Pennsylvania mistake. Sorry.
It's 743 and 81.
Right.
And you'll recall, or maybe you don't know, we were required at the time to make improvements to that interchange back in 08, which we did at the cost of the company to improve access. Because at the time, I do recall, there was some concern that traffic would get backed up, and that I just don't recall that ever happening over the 10 years we've been operating the property.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So both of us missed. You said 80, I said 78. We'll settle on 81.
81, that's the right one.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Then please proceed with whatever's next.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
With that, I'm going to just move into the record 5 different documents. Let me just explain what they are. 2 of them I'm going to focus on for a moment. First is our PowerPoint presentation today, just so the record is complete. The second exhibit that I want you to have, and we have submitted it, but I think it's important to highlight it here, is a March 12th, 2019 letter which was sent to Linda Lloyd from Carnarvon Township. And if you would bear with me, I just want to read a few parts of it into the record. This is a letter from the Carnarvon Township Board of Supervisors, and it states as follows. Dear members of the board, Carnarvon Township, Berks County is the host municipality for the proposed Category 4 casino to be located in Berks County in the above referenced matter, which is this matter. Members of the Board of Supervisors of Carnarvon Township attended the public input hearing on March 4th, 2019, and wish to supplement the township's position through submission of this correspondence. I understand that the Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the township's supplementation of the record. The Board of Supervisors of Carnarvon Township, Berks County, remains unanimous in its support of the proposed casino. The comments made at the March 4th, 2019 public input hearing have not altered that support. During the public input hearing, the Game Control Board heard from a number of individuals, many of whom identified themselves as residents of the community. Subsequent to the hearing, the board reviewed the list of citizens who commented and note that only 6 of the citizens who spoke out against the casino actually reside in Carnarvon Township, Berks County. The Board of Supervisors requests that greater weight be given to the position of actual township residents and their elected local officials. I will not go on to read the rest. You have it already submitted. I'm also going to offer it again as Exhibit 2 to this hearing. Exhibit 3 that I am offering for admission is the formal land development plan approval, also dated March 12th by the Board of Commissioners through their process, which is a hearing process, open and transparent process. Exhibit 4 is an important document that I'd like to, again, just take a couple moments here to talk to you about. I should mention I'm going to take a knock on myself. I'm going to hand up 3 sets of these exhibits. I wish I brought 7. I could only fit 3 sets in my bag. But I apologize in advance that I don't have a set for each and every one of you.
We know how to share.
Okay. Exhibit 4 is, I think, very interesting, will be very interesting to the board. It has to do with the Plain Ridge Park Casino, which is in Plainville, Massachusetts, which we opened in 2015. Under Massachusetts law, the Massachusetts Gaming Commission is required to commission a study looking at the direct impacts of new casino development in that state. And in this case, it was done by the University of Massachusetts and its School of Public Health and Health Sciences. So they did a look back about 2 years after a new casino was put into a community in Massachusetts. If I could just offer a couple of the observations that I think you might be interested in. First, and I'll be brief, there was no reported change in the number of Gamblers Anonymous meetings in the Plainville area or the number of people attending meetings. From the Secretary of New England Gamblers Anonymous, we have had Gamblers Anonymous meetings here at the Plainville United Methodist Church for approximately 20 years. At present, about 15 people attend these meetings each week. We have not seen any increase in attendance since the casino opened. There was no change reported in personal bankruptcy filings in Norfolk County, where Plainville is situated. There was no change in divorce filings, restraining orders, cases of child welfare in Norfolk County. 2 observations on problem gaming. First, by the Chairman of the Board of Health of Plainville, Massachusetts. I don't really see any impact on the health and well-being of the people of Plainville Conditions now seem to be as they were prior to the opening of the casino. From Jennifer Thompson, the town administrator. Residents have not come to us with concerns that there has been an increase in problem gaming. On attitudes about the casino from the township administrator. Overwhelmingly, the people of Plainville are happy the casino is here. From Lou LeBlanc, the chairman of the Board of Health. I would have to say that everyone I have come across is pleased with the casino to this point. It has come through with all the promises that were made. On environment, again from Jennifer Thompson, the town administrator. We have had virtually no issues in terms of traffic or congestion because of the casino. It actually runs better than it did before. There was a track where this casino was located. From Kathleen Parker, treasurer of Plainville, Mass. Where the track and casino is located, it is the most dangerous intersection in town. But it was dangerous long before the casino. They talk about a police officer who was killed in an accident in the area. They have done a lot to make it safer. On crime, no impacts on overall crime. However, we did see a temporary increase in credit card fraud. In Plainville, there has also been an increase in reports of lost property and suspicious activity. Part of this increase attributable to increased volume of visitors to the area. We want to be very upfront about the crime issue. I know it's a concern, but I would submit to you that crime will increase in any location in the Commonwealth whenever a new use is put in which increases the number of visitors to the area. It's not necessarily because it's a casino. You can see the same effect at a shopping mall or any other large development. So I just want to be very upfront about that. Real quick, a few others. Construction expenditure. $150 million spent by Penn National to build Plain Ridge Park, with 86.7% of this money spent within Massachusetts. Operational expenses. $129.5 million incurred in operational expenses, 87% spent in Massachusetts. Business establishments. I think this is important. This is from Kathleen Parker, treasurer of Plainville. Wow, we have had an awful lot of influx of new businesses. We have had no problem keeping restaurants in town very healthy. That was one of the problems people were saying. Oh, we'll knock out the small restaurants. No, that is not true. They are thriving. And lastly, on employment. One of the things that the casino promised to do was reach out to Plainville folks first in terms of employment, which they did. They kept their word. They are our largest employer in Plainville. It has certainly had an impact. That was from the town administrator, Jennifer Thompson, and from the chairman of the Board of Health, Lou LeBlanc. As far as employment goes, it has definitely been a positive impact. So that's Exhibit 4. And then Exhibit 5 was referenced by Mr. DeSario, and that is an assessment of the percentage of travel on the roads as he testified to. I wanted to have that. So with that, unless there's any objection from OEC, and I provided them with copies of all of these in advance, I would ask that those be moved into the record.
No objection.
Okay, so moved.
With that, I think we're open to any other questions that you may have at this point.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Enforcement Council. Questions or comments?
The Office of Enforcement Council does have some follow-up questions. Sorry, place up minor. John Crowe, CROHE, Assistant Enforcement Counsel for the Office of Enforcement Council. To follow up on the issue of the traffic light, does Penn National plan to have the traffic light that was discussed installed?
So we are waiting for a final determination from PennDOT on that. We have requested that the traffic light be installed. Their initial analysis was that it wasn't warranted based on the expected traffic, but that is something we've requested and is still pending.
Okay, so you do commit on the record that your intention is at this time to have the light installed?
We've requested it, yes, subject to approval from PennDOT.
Okay, thank you. Regarding your plans for a sports and race book, what are your plans to create a synergy between sports betting and race betting other than having them together in one physical location?
Well, we've had, as you're probably aware, we've had, I think, a good degree of success with the location of the sports book at the Granville property. We located it in the existing simulcast racing lounge for the reason you mentioned, which is to try to create exposure to the racing product from the sports bettors who are primarily new customers to the property. So we'll start there, as you correctly pointed out, that at the Morgantown property, the facility will be combined, race and sports book. Again, our experience at Granville is that we're exposing the horse racing product, and simulcast is obviously national, so players can bet on races around the country, and it starts there. And I think that's the best way to ensure that we get the exposure to the racing product from the new customers who will be coming in to bet on sports.
Is there or are there any plans to have poker tables or a poker room at this facility?
There are not plans to do that at this time.
Well,
Excuse me, just to clarify, so the 75 table games that are going to be there are
No.
not going to...
30. 75 is at Granville.
Thank you, but the 30 would be roulette and other products, not poker.
Correct. Craps, blackjack, roulette.
Will the entire facility be 21 and over, or will minors be permitted in the facility for non-gaming amenities such as restaurants?
It'll be 21 and over for the entire building, including the food and beverage outlets. Minors will not be allowed in the building.
And I noted in your presentation that you referred to having 250 full-time equivalent positions. How do you define a full-time equivalent position? Is that a 40-hour-a-week position, or
Correct.
do you have some other definition?
No, that's the definition.
Okay, and how many total employees will you have at the facility, and how many will be full-time versus part-time?
Dan, do you have that off the top of your head?
I do not have the exact number. It will probably run 70% or so full-time, 30% part-time, but that is all depending on once we get in and start hiring folks and seeing what the demand is, and so that could change.
And regarding the part-time employees, do you anticipate providing any benefit to part-time employees?
We do not.
Okay. Do you have any plans to install any type of employee dining lounge or cafe as an added benefit for your employees?
We do. As we typically do at all of our properties, there will be a dining area for the team.
And how many slot machines was it that you plan or anticipate having at this facility?
750.
And how many of those will be owned by Penn National as opposed to leased?
We typically, it depends on the location and the competitive situation, but we typically lease 2 to 4% of our floor. So the rest would be, and I would anticipate that would be the makeup of this property, and the rest would be owned.
What training programs will be provided to service staff for the prevention of serving alcohol to overly intoxicated guests?
It'll be serve safe. It'll be the same training programs that we currently offer at Granville.
And what training will be provided to casino staff for stopping false identifications or underage individuals using the legitimate identifications of an of-age individual to attempt to enter the facility?
And that too, that'll be Veridox, which is the same system that we currently use at the Granville facility.
And will there be, aside from the identification verification system that you'll have installed, any training programs provided to the employees themselves to recognize false IDs or an individual attempting to use another individual's identification?
Yes, there will.
And would you be able to maybe give us an overview of that at this time?
Yeah, it's really the same program that's been very successful at our Grantville facility. Just like responsible gaming, it's every new team member that comes on board will receive this training, both responsible gaming as well as identifying underage minors. That training will be an annual training and also quarterly refresher courses as well as security meetings that are done on a daily basis.
And Dan, I think you also mentioned earlier the incentive programs you have for security.
Yes, and the 100 on 100 program that we've also will continue to use that as well.
So regarding that training and the annual and quarterly follow-ups, which groups of employees receive that follow-up training? Is that every employee at the facility, or is that limited to security staff?
That is every team member at our facility.
Are there any plans at this time to involve or sell the real property involved in this transaction to Penn National's Real Estate Investment Trust gaming and leisure property?
There are no current plans.
And when do you anticipate construction of this facility to begin?
So we are hoping to initiate shortly once we receive final environmental permits, and the goal would be to open by the end of next year.
Okay. I have no further follow-up questions for Penn National at this time.
Okay. Does Enforcement Council have any presentation they want to make, call any witnesses or anything?
We do. At this time, we would like to call Christopher K. Bauer to discuss the traffic impact study review.
Okay.
Mr. Bauer, if you could, please state your name for the record.
Christopher K. Bauer, Christopher K. Bauer, Bauer.
And could you please tell us your place of employment, occupation, and your job duties?
I'm a licensed professional engineer in New York and Pennsylvania. I'm also a licensed professional traffic operations engineer. I specialize in transportation and traffic engineering. I'm an associate and general manager of the Camp Hill office of McMahon Associates.
And how long have you been in that employment?
I have 25 years of experience, almost 26, starting in September also. I've been employed with McMahon Associates for 3 years.
And have you ever given testimony of this nature before?
Yes.
And approximately how many times have you given such testimony?
About a dozen times.
And have you ever given testimony in front of any governmental entities before?
Yes, municipal entities, including first, second class townships and boroughs. I've testified in conditional use hearings and special exception hearings, and have been previously qualified as an expert witness.
Okay. If there are no objections, I would now ask to have Mr. Bauer qualified as an expert for the purpose of reviewing the traffic impact study.
Fine.
No objection on the record.
Thank you.
Was McMahon Transportation Engineers and Planning hired on behalf of PennDOT to review and assess the traffic impact studies submitted for the proposed Category 4 facility in the Commonwealth?
Yes.
And as part of your employment duties, were you tasked with the review and assessment of the traffic impact study for Penn National's proposed Morgantown facility?
Yes.
When was that study reviewed?
The review was completed on May 13th, 2019.
And could you please discuss what methodology was used for your review?
Standard traffic engineering, industry standards, and PennDOT standards for the review of traffic impact studies.
So what was your involvement in the actual review itself?
Review and oversight of the review.
And were your results or the results generated as a part of your review provided to the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board?
Yes.
At any time during your review and assessment of the information, did anyone attempt to influence or coerce you to provide a favorable or unfavorable review?
No.
Were you notified by anyone attempting to influence or coerce anyone at McMahon Transportation Engineers and Planners during the review?
No.
Can you please tell us, as we've already heard, based on your review, who prepared the traffic impact study?
The study was completed by Langen Engineering and Environmental Services.
And when was that study prepared?
The study is dated October 19th, 2018.
Excuse me, I need to interrupt. For the record, did we ever swear him in this morning?
Yes.
Okay, proceed.
And for what purpose was that traffic impact study prepared?
The study was prepared to determine the effects of, to the transportation network of the construction of a new casino located at the 36 acres site on Morgantown Road in Canavan, Berks County.
And can you please present a summary of your report regarding the Morgantown project?
Sure. As testified to previously, this casino development is proposed to have one full movement access and one right-in, right-out access to Morgantown Road, located between Mindview Drive and to the west and I-176 southbound off-ramp to the east. Based on the information in the TIS, the Berks County Casino development will consist of 750 slot machines with 30 gaming tables, 7 positions per table. It's important to note that the information provided, this site was previously approved for the Tri-County Mall project. All of the improvements for the Tri-County Mall project, including the accesses to the site, are already constructed and are proposed to remain to provide access to the proposed casino. The only remaining improvement to be constructed is a light, a traffic signal light at the full movement access, which the proposed casino traffic study recommends installing if or when warranted based on post-development traffic counts. It's our understanding that the details of this traffic study were reviewed and approved by PennDOT District 5, and we have reviewed the trip generation comparison of the proposed development to the previously approved development for which the off-site improvements were installed. Based on the review of the TIS, we concur with PennDOT District 5 that the study is acceptable and that the trip generation is anticipated to be lower than previously approved development trip generation, and therefore the recommendation of the previously approved study are anticipated to adequately accommodate the traffic generated by the proposed casino.
And did you say that that traffic impact study did recommend the traffic signal be installed?
Yes.
And do you know if the installation of that traffic signal has been planned?
Yes, based on testimony and the traffic study recommendation that the signal will be installed at the main full access once, if and when the warranted, it is warranted based on traffic volumes on the post-development traffic counts for the casino.
And you had a chance to just listen to the testimony that was provided regarding the traffic impact study, correct?
Yes.
And was that testimony consistent with the independent review that you provided to the board?
Yes.
And was there anything in that testimony that you found to be invalid, erroneous, or contrary to your own findings?
No.
And is there anything further that you would like to provide regarding the traffic impact study associated with the Morgantown project?
No.
How does will the project have an impact on traffic on Morgantown Road? And would the proposed traffic signal at the access point to the proposed facility alleviate any potential issues with traffic on Morgantown Road?
Yes. There will be some impacts. There's additional traffic on Morgantown Road, but they'll be negligible. And the installation of the traffic signal will alleviate and mitigate any of that impact.
Aye, Bud.
At this time, we open up our witness to cross-examination or questions from the board.
Any questions?
No questions for the witness, thank you.
Okay. Are there other aspects to your presentation?
There are other aspects, but not with relation to traffic.
Well, I'm going to hold questions here until you've made your entire presentation, and then the board will ask whatever they want of your witness.
The only other aspect to our presentation is that based upon the information provided by Penn National with regard to the casino Plain Ridge Casino in Massachusetts. We also looked at the crime occurring within our casinos within the Commonwealth over the last 10 years, going back to 2010 actually. The uniform crime reporting system state police utilizes for the crime that occurs around the state. We focused on the crimes occurring at and around the casinos. The types of crimes, and I think state police has testified to this at a number of our public renewal hearings, are the types of crimes that you would see in any large shopping mall. Predominantly theft. Usually it's theft of vouchers, theft of belongings of individuals that have been left behind, and the individual returns and the item is missing. We see some breaking into vehicles, not a large number. I think over the last 10 years, and we excluded Nemacolin because that facility has little or no crime, and we didn't want to skew the numbers more positively. So in the worst case scenario, we're looking at, with regard to theft crimes, out of 10, for the 11 casinos, we're looking at 1,548 theft crimes a year combined for all 10 casinos. So I think that's, a fairly low number when you consider the millions of people that attend our casinos. Sex offenses are averaging 4.5 a year, and usually that's some individual in the casino.
4.5 statewide or 4
statewide for all the casinos combined.
Thank you.
Okay, these are all 11 casinos combined.
Okay.
And those are usually as a result of someone inappropriately touching an employee of the casino or a patron of the casino. And as you know, we exclude individuals consistently when that information is brought to our attention, and those individuals are also prosecuted. So we have a binder that we'd like to move into evidence of all those of the uniform crime reporting statistics, and I think that would be OEC exhibit.
That would be OEC exhibit 1.
And we'd ask that be moved into evidence so the board can take that into consideration. We've also provided a copy to Mr. King for his review prior to today's hearing.
I have no objection if I could just make one quick comment. I've studied very carefully the UCR data for our own facility, Hollywood Casino at Grantville. There were a lot of, quite frankly, horrible allegations made about gaming at the public input hearing. And I just want to make one quick point. Over those 10 years, 5 months of reports at Grantville, there have been zero prostitution arrests. And I think that's important. And remember, at any casino in this Commonwealth, it's one of the most heavily surveilled and policed locations you will find anywhere in the four corners of this state. And there has never been a prostitution arrest, according to UCR data, at Hollywood Casino, Grantville, from January of 2009 to the present. And I'm not saying anything happened before, that's just the data that I was able to look at. I have no objection to the exhibit.
Okay, fine. Is there anything else you have to present this morning?
That concludes our presentation.
Okay. Now I'll open it up. Any additional questions any board members may have on any of these subjects?
I'd just like to follow up on the traffic report, if I could. Am I correct in what I heard that when the mall was proposed, that a traffic light was going to go in? PennDOT said it warranted it based on what the anticipated traffic would be?
It's my understanding that at that time, a traffic signal was a mitigation measure for their traffic.
And did I understand what was said earlier, that you are going to put one in, but PennDOT is saying it may not be warranted now?
We have requested one, but yes, PennDOT is still reviewing that request.
You have requested a traffic light.
Correct.
But PennDOT's saying it may not
They're
be warranted.
reviewing our request. Their initial indication was that it was not warranted, but they're reviewing our request.
And PennDOT knows you're paying for it? Or are
yes.
you paying for it? I guess I should have said that way. You're paying for it. Okay. Now, as far as when you go in and review, you're licensed, and the other individual from Langdon was licensed, and I'm not really familiar with the process, but I think there is some skepticism, not by us, but by some people in the public, that the data that's generated from a report or the results of a report can sometimes be skewed. It's my understanding that you all have your professional guidelines that you look at, right? And so the report is what the report is based on industry standards. Is that correct? And you want to elaborate a little bit more on how that works?
Well, that's true. It's all based on industry standards, but it's also based on PennDOT standards.
Okay. So it's not really the individual engineer's interpretation or bias or putting it, it's like you're going to a standardized data reference book that this is what happens in this type of area. Am I correct?
That's correct. We do, for the trip generation, they studied 4 sites and came up with trip generation for those 4 sites. So we have real data on the casinos.
And then when you did your analysis, did you look at the conclusions that were drawn by Langdon, or did you do a separate report and then match them up at the end saying, oh, we came up with the same data?
No, we reviewed. We did not do a study, our own study.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any other questions down here on any subject? Kathy?
Thank you. Starting with traffic, and I'm looking at, if somebody wants to put it back up, Mr. King, slide 13 that shows the site plan.
I have it here. I think somebody.
And Morgantown Road.
Is there somebody who can actually get it back?
There
up?
you go.
There we go.
Okay. So, to Mr. Bauer, if I understood you correctly, this looks like it's a pretty true north-oriented map. We have Mine View Drive on the the west, and what's not shown here, it's right at the cutoff, kind of towards the upper part of the map. I assume Morgantown Road continues to extend beyond the ingress and egress to the swimming pool, which I'm going to ask you about, to get to I-176. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. The traffic from I-176, it was your testimony as well as the testimony of the Hollywood's engineer that that's expected to be the heaviest of all of the various ingresses and egresses to the Hollywood site would be coming from I-76 heading west, I-176 heading west on Morgantown Road, correct?
That's right.
The proposed traffic light, if warranted, would be at the entrance that's kind of light gray that leads directly to the proposed Hollywood site. But prior to getting there, traffic will pass, at least what I'm seeing, 2 other ingresses and egresses. One, which looks like it goes to the swimming pool, and a second one that looks like it goes to a site, which I'm going to ask somebody what is there. But neither of those 2 spots currently have lights. Is that a correct statement?
That's correct.
And from your review, if this is something you considered, will ingress and egress to either of those 2 sites require any other kind of traffic control mechanism with that increased heaviest traffic expected to come in that direction off of 176?
It's my opinion that it'll be negligible.
Okay. The site that is totally adjacent to I guess it looks like 2 sites that are totally adjacent to Morgantown Road. I don't know if this is for the traffic engineer or for someone at Hollywood, so I'll just put the question out. What is the usage of those 2 sites? And then in particular, is any of them a school? Or either of them schools?
If I could just clarify, in terms of the 2 sites that are at the top of the map, and it looks like there's some trucks parked up there as well.
Right, yes, that's what I'm looking at.
So I just want to make clear, we own that now. That's
Okay.
part of our parcel.
Okay.
And that is there because that, at the time the Google images was taken, and if I recall driving up and down the turnpike, I think at some point the landowner was allowing the storage and use of
Okay,
oil
so that is
wells,
not
drilling.
some other independent business usage of any kind.
No.
So the only usage that I'm seeing here on the map, and if my question is appropriate, between you and 176 is the community building swimming pool.
That's correct.
Okay. With regard to that community building and swimming pool, where I see on this map a lot of green space, my question is, am I looking at low fields? Am I looking at tall trees? What am I looking at in terms of a buffer zone visually? Can I see the swimming pool from the casino parking lot?
So we can't necessarily comment about what it looks like in the fall, but I can tell you if you drive past it right now, as I recall, there are a whole crop of trees that come around and shield the pool from looking down into the casino area.
Okay.
And then I think it's just kind of a field that then flows down to the turnpike. But there is a crop of trees that come around the back of that pool.
Okay. Is that correct from
That's
them
right.
seeing the Hollywood? And since it looks like it's an outdoor swimming pool, I assume if in the winter the leaves are off, there's not anybody swimming in the pool.
I think that's
right.
Very,
Okay.
very accurate.
Staying with the traffic again, if I may,
I have just one question to clarify things. You said that the stuff that shows what looks, so it might be trucks and whatnot in those two spaces, that's your property. And I understand the problem with Google Maps. Is that stuff still there? Will it still be there once you start and finish your construction?
It's currently undeveloped, but that's something we're going to consider down the road. But
So
that's
what I'm
potential
looking at
future
is
development.
just vacant now? So this picture would have been taken?
I think
It's
most,
just gravel, I think.
again, this is
Yep.
based on my experience
Gravel lot.
driving past the site multiple times a week. There was a lot, it looked like drilling equipment. I don't know if it was for gas or water, and I think all that equipment's been removed.
Okay, but
Parcel was previously owned by the Petinero Group, and so they used that for other.
it's a very simple, not trying to make this complicated. That area is your property.
Yes.
You do not intend to have non-casino related use going on there.
In the short run, no. That's something that later we would consider development for other non-casino use. So something like,
Okay.
other retail.
So it's
or
not
something.
disrupting. Whatever's happening there, there's no business
Correct.
to be disrupted
Correct.
there. That's what I wanted to make
Correct.
sure I understood. Go ahead.
Yes.
thank you. Mr. Bauer, I just want to again be clear that I'm connecting the dots correctly. Since your scope of your review was to review what the a traffic engineer hired by Hollywood did that, because and I'm a little confused now about which part of their testimony. When we talked about earlier the local road network, and there was particular reference to east of the township routes 23, 401, 83, and Little Conestoga Road. Was that also part of what you reviewed?
We reviewed what was in that study. We were made aware of the citizens' complaints. And I concur with the testimony that the impacts to the local road networks would be the most intense at the site itself, okay? And they're negligible.
Okay.
So moving away from the site will be as negligible, if not less.
Thank you. As many of my board members did, attended the public input hearing, and I very much appreciated where folks who testified on both sides were coming from. I think that sometimes there was hopes that the scope of what is within this board's review was broader than it is, and some of the issues that were raised were really issues that are moot from our point of view because the legislature had already determined that there would be mini casinos, what the potential places to locate them were, that gambling was legal in Pennsylvania, et cetera. But with regard to this site specifically for Hollywood, I just want to put a few things on the record that we haven't talked about yet. The scope of your citing a Cat 4, deciding to open one or more Cat 4 organizations was defined by the legislative parameters. And what I mean by that was the legislator had predetermined that existing Category 1 licenses had this kind of 25-mile buffer zone around them. Well, let me start there. So with regard to what I'll call the eastern part of the state, your starting point was not Philly and its suburbs, really kind of all up and along the East Coast, because that was all covered by buffer area. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, because the 25-mile buffer zones for existing licensees, correct.
Okay. So then within your scope of deciding where to look for a location to bid on one of the available Cat 4 licenses, what was the nature of the communities, if I could say it that were available to you? And what I'm trying to get to is this notion of kind of where Pennsylvania kind of decided it wanted to have regional kinds of casinos and kind of what it left available and open for folks considering Cat 4 licenses. I'd like to hear your thinking behind your choices.
Sure. So our first choice in the first auction, we bid on York. We did that because that is a primary feeder market for Penn National Racecourse. We knew that we had a lot of customers in that area, and we did that for competitive reasons. We then participated again in the fifth auction and to select this site. This was much more offensive for us. We do think this is a new market. We're right on the outskirts of the protective zone for Valley Forge. We do think we'll be able to compete very effectively with Valley Forge for that really dense population west of Philadelphia, around the King of Prussia area, partially because of our superior access and ease of access. And when it came to selecting the actual site, Carnarvon Township and Morgantown, New Morgantown, those were the areas we were really focused on. And then specifically, this site was just ideal because of its ease of access with 76 and I-76, or 176.
Thank you. And for Office of Enforcement Counsel, first, thank you. You got rid of a lot of my questions with the state police information that you shared with regard to our track record in crime. But the one thing that, and I guess this is maybe for Office of Enforcement Counsel and for Hollywood, because Hollywood, your experience so far is an integration of your security team with on-site state police. And the Cat 4s, again, by nature of the legislative designation, will not have state police on site, but will still require the on-site security with coordination with the local enforcement council. So I guess maybe if OEC has anything to comment about what our experience has been to date in Pennsylvania with security teams on site working with law enforcement, and then for Hollywood Casino to talk about whether you think your experience will be any different with your security team at this Morgantown location and local law enforcement.
Based upon what we've seen over the last 12 or so years, state police usually has jurisdiction within the casino. And so there are a lot of areas that have their local police force. So anything that occurs outside of the casino, security, surveillance, they work with the local police. So as it relates to crimes or violations that happen within the casino, between security and surveillance, those individuals are apprehended. If they're not apprehended, an identification of those individuals are quickly made, that information is shared with local police. Local police usually very good at tracking down these individuals. We've had a number of individuals that make their way out of the casino after committing a crime, or as you know, may commit a crime in the parking lot of the casino. We've had little or no trouble apprehending those individuals and bringing them to justice. So I think the security force, I'm happy to hear they will have roving security in the parking lots as well, and surveillance cameras in the parking lot as well. So between their security and surveillance force, we'll be able to identify anyone. They have the authority to detain those individuals and hold them for the local police to arrive, or to just identify those individuals and report them to the local police. So I don't anticipate that to be a problem. I think also the location of the facility. I don't think you're going to see the high number of criminal incidents that you would see if the facility was located in the city. So I don't think I anticipate seeing something akin to what we see at most at Valley Forge, which is one of the lowest criminal crime incident rates between Valley Forge and Nemacolin, which Nemacolin is virtually non-existent.
And Hollywood, in terms of your expectations with regard to security at this site where there's not state police on site, do you anticipate any differences or difficulties in your properly securing and policing the property and patrons?
I would agree with everything that was just stated. That is exactly the relationship that we would look for with local police force.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there other questions from the board at this time? Okay. Anything further from either party?
Just a quick administrative issue. First of all, I just want to put on the record that we're very, we wanted to thank the professional staff of the board for their diligence, their responsiveness, their professionalism with respect to this CAT 4 application and our other CAT 4 application. I'd like to hand up, maybe to Mr. Cook or to your council, our exhibit packages that were admitted. And lastly, I neglected to make a very important request, which is put on the record that we respectfully request that you approve this application.
It's a useful thing for you to do.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Any further comments from Enforcement Council?
No further comment.
Okay, fine. We're going to move on to our next hearing, and we'll be taking a break for executive session and hopefully take this matter up when we return from that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's too damn long. It's like right straight back. With that other session, I know the session started. I think I'm going to make it. Thank goodness.
Okay, next up, we have Mount Airy, petition for certificate to conduct sports wagering. And the petitioners can come forward, please. Again, I would ask everyone who's going to speak today to please state and spell your name for the court reporter, and any non-attorney witnesses that might be testifying today should now be stand up and be sworn in.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you. Mr. Sklar, you can begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Michael Sklar, S-K-L-A-R, Gaming Counsel for Mount Airy Casino. First, let me introduce the individuals who are here with me today. To my right is Todd Greenberg, the General Manager and Chief Operating Officer at Mount Airy. Next to him is Brad Fisher, who's Regulatory Counsel for the Stars Group. And next to him, you all know Bill Downey, who's Gaming Counsel for the Stars Group. Also here is Richard Whitby, who is the Executive Director of Slot Operations, who will be available if there's any questions.
Okay.
So we're going to be very brief. Todd's going to start and give you an overview of the plans for the retail sports book at Mount Airy, and then he's going to turn it over to Bill Downey, who's going to give you a brief overview of the Stars Group, who's Mount Airy's partner in interactive gaming and sports wagering. And Bill's also going to describe the new partnership between the Stars Group and Fox Sports. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd.
Okay. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for taking the time. You gave me no idea that I was going to have to do this, but I'm assuming this means it goes forward.
Correct.
Hi. I apologize. This has no traffic studies. It has no red lights, but if you'd like us to put one up, I'm sure we can. The first slide is just an external view of our property with our new expansion that we're very proud of. It added 20,000 square feet of first-class convention and meeting space, along with 96 hotel rooms. It's been open for approximately a month and is off to a good start. Here are some pictures of the new convention center. I think they're a little squeezed. The ceilings are a little bit higher than you're seeing in here. And then we get to the sportsbook location. Let me give you some orientation. Within the red box, you'll see the proposed poker and sportsbook, which is approximately 7,000 square feet. This used to be our nightclub, which we're no longer using because we've got concert and entertainment venue in the new convention center. The poker room, which is in the front, is facing out onto the existing casino floor. Right now, there's just a couple of double doors. We're going to cut out a space approximately 20 feet wide to introduce people into the space, along with 5 85-inch screens that'll also have signage on top of them. The poker room will have 12 tables. Right now we run 9 poker tables and 2 blackjack tables on the upstairs third room. The 2 blackjack tables have not been open in quite a bit, so we're doing away with those tables and adding to poker. We do believe that moving poker to the third floor definitely caused our business to decrease. Poker doesn't always have to be in a prime location, but this is a particularly difficult location to get to because you have to take elevators up to it. I notice sometimes we have guests in the third floor of the hotel are trapped in the elevator because they don't have a card, because they're looking to go on the wrong floor. So we believe that this will increase our poker business, and we also believe that the poker and sports book are complementary to each other and draw on many of the same customers. We've already started demo work on it. We're quite excited about the designs for it. The space will be completely non-smoking. And currently the poker room is non-smoking. Most poker rooms are, and we just feel that it's more conducive to everybody to, it's hard. I remember when I was a kid and I would fly on the plane and the first 3 rows would say smoking. and then the next 3 rows would be non-smoking. Never really made any sense to me. So we want this space to be completely non-smoking. The sportsbook portion of it will be approximately 3,800 square feet. We're going to have, in addition to 3 live teller windows, we're going to have 4 self-service kiosks as soon as they're approved in the actual sports book. And we will be putting 4 additional kiosks on the existing gaming floor. They will take the place of, I think it's called 4 units. It's actually kind of one of the table game slot machine hybrids. But it won't be a substantial change. Basically, we're adding to the floor, not subtracting, but we will have 4 less slot units where this goes. Of course, we're going to have all the normal stuff you have: flat screen, HD televisions, tickers, live tellers. During hours that we're not open, we're going to have a committed cage window at the cage that'll be open 24/7. So if you come in at 3 in the morning and you're going to be leaving soon and you want to cash a ticket, you'll be able to do that 24/7. And then we come to a sportsbook rendering. You'll see in between the columns is where the majority of the televisions will be, although there'll be televisions all over the area. They'll be sprinkled throughout the poker and sportsbook area. And then if you look to the right of the televisions, you'll see where the live teller area is going to be. And, we have all the requirements, separate door to get into it, adequate barrier. So that is the view from there. And then this is the view from the lower level poker area. So when you first walk in, there's the floor where the poker area is, and then the floor for the sports book is elevated a couple of feet. You'll see the 4 stairs there, but we also have ADA access on the other side of the area there. So we're actually quite excited about the room. We think it's going to be very attractive. We think it's going to be a great upgrade. These are just a couple of more of the poker area renderings. And I'm going to turn it over to Bill now. Bill,
Thank you, Todd. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Bill Downey, D-O-W-N-E-Y, with the law firm of Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, and Schreck for the STARS Group. With me, as Michael mentioned earlier, is Bradley Fisher, who is regulatory legal counsel for the STARS Group. I know that you were introduced to the STARS Group in August of 2018, so I'm not going to beat you over the head with that introduction, just hit a couple of high points if I could. The STARS Group is the world's largest publicly traded online gaming company with both iGaming and sports wagering operations. Their sports wagering operation is a growing business for them. They employ approximately 4,200 people across their global offices. They are listed on the NASDAQ in the US and on the Toronto Stock Exchange in Ontario, Canada. From a technical operations perspective, they employ a proprietary platform. That single platform allows them to operate and integrate all verticals that they operate. As you'll see in the slide, it offers some customer-friendly opportunities in terms of treatment of their customer. From a regulatory and compliance perspective, they are one of, if not the world's most licensed online gaming brand, operating under licenses, approvals, and in 21 jurisdictions around the world. And they're pretty proud of their compliance program, and in 2017 received a Gambling Compliance Award for the most significant contribution to responsible gaming during that cycle. On May 8th, the Stars Group was excited to announce that the Stars Group and Fox Sports had formed a national media and sports wagering partnership for use in the United States. And included in that partnership was announcement of their plans to launch FoxBet. FoxBet represents their platform for providing real money wagering in jurisdictions in the U.S. that are regulated. In terms of the background for Fox Sports and the basis for that partnership, anyone familiar with any sports fan, anyone who's watching sports on TV can appreciate the incredible platform that branding with Fox affords. Some of the highlights of the Fox program are included on the slide. They are, as you can see, both in their distribution platforms, many of which I'm sure you'll recognize, and their key properties, which you'll recognize just by logo. They provide an amazing platform and an amazing connectivity to the sports customer. One data point I would make here that I think is particularly interesting is the fact that they've identified that about 300+ billion live event viewership minutes are available through the Fox and FS1 networks on an annual basis every year. As I mentioned, the real money wagering will occur through the FoxBet platform. If we turn over, you've seen this slide or something like it in virtually all of the sports sports wagering certificates that you've seen. It is the intent of Mount Airy and the Stars Group that they would be offering a full menu of games in all of the major leagues and beyond: NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, NCAA, and also specific sort of one-off items: Olympics, FIFA World Cup, things of that nature. Wager types you'll see down bottom include those that you've seen and reviewed in the past. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge, in light of the last presentation, we were not aware of the Pennsylvania burgeoning ostrich market, but we'll seriously consider that if that seems to be the place to go. Finally, this slide provides a lot of data points in connection with some of their operations. I'd just point out the following as high points here. Between customer support, security, gaming integrity, responsible gaming, and compliance, this group of their staff comprises approximately 20% of the entirety of their organization. And I would want to flag for you that in the responsible gaming basket, they are quite proud of their role as a leader in the area. They will have and implement, and in fact have in front of your staff now, all of the typical stop limits, self-exclusion, timeouts, all of those items that you've heard in the context of other hearings on this subject. They have partnered with over a dozen responsible gaming organizations worldwide and make those resources available to players who they determine to be at risk. And they are accredited by the leading gambling responsibility organizations in Canada, UK, and the US. With that, I will turn it back to Todd.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. As I said, we're quite excited. We're hopeful that we can get the facility open by the first NFL game, which I believe is September 5th. As always, when you're doing projects like this, you have certain issues you're waiting for, such as licensing of kiosk. In addition to that, long lead items like carpets and things like that. We're trying our very best to get it open as soon as possible to be able to offer it to our guests. At this time, please let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you. I think we'll start with the questions or comments from Enforcement Council.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the board. Sarah Colasar, KOLESAR, Assistant Enforcement Counsel with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. We do just have a couple of questions. Based on your presentation, I just wanted to confirm that you aren't moving any other table games or slot machines other than what was stated in your presentation.
No, we will not be, and this is kind of new greenfield space.
Mm-hmm. And as far as your poker room, when do you anticipate that the new poker room will be finished?
We would hope to open it up the same time as the sports book, so hopefully in the start of September. But we'd certainly want to have as small a downtime as possible when we move it. So everything, including the electrical hookups for shufflers and all the cameras will be up before we actually move the tables from upstairs to downstairs.
No further questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? No one? Does Enforcement Counsel have a presentation?
We do not have a formal presentation. However, we do request to put the following statement and recommendation into the record. The Office of Enforcement Counsel, along with the Bureau of Casino Compliance, the Bureau of Gaming Operations, the Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement, the Bureau of Gaming Laboratory Operations, and the Bureau of Licensing, along with the Office of Diversity, the Office of Compulsive and Problem Gambling, and the Office of Sports Wagering Operations, have reviewed and consulted extensively on the petitions and appendices filed by Mount Airy No. 1 LLC for a sports wagering certificate. After which, the OEC filed an answer to this matter, requesting that the board order the implementation of certain listed conditions if it was so inclined to grant the relief requested in the petition. As a result, the OEC has no objection to the approval of Mount Airy No. 1 LLC petition for a sports wagering certificate. However, we request that the issuance of a sports wagering certificate to Mount Airy No. 1 LLC be subject to the proposed conditions outlined in OEC's answer filed on May 1st, 2019, in response to that petition, as well as any conditions imposed by the board.
Thank you. Any reaction, comments from petitioner?
No, we've read the conditions, and if the board grants the petition, the conditions are acceptable.
Okay, very good. Any other additional questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, I want to thank you all for coming in, and we'll move on.
Mr. Chairman, just one housekeeping. If we could move the PowerPoint presentation into the record, please.
That's so moved. Without objection?
No objection.
Okay. We're going to take this up for a vote under the Office of Chief Counsel's portion of the agenda. Right now, we're going into executive session to consider what we've heard this morning, and then we'll return and move on with the rest of the agenda. Thank you very much.
That's all.
Thank you. Next, consider a motion to approve the minutes and transcripts from the meeting of March 6th and April 17th, 2019. May I have such a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the minutes and transcripts of the March 6 and April 17, 2019 meetings.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted. Kevin O'Toole.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barish, members of the board. So today, as we listen to the presentations, it's quite obvious that sports wagering is really on everybody's agenda, and our staff has done an outstanding job of implementing both retail sports wagering and online sports wagering, but we're probably still less than 50% complete. So we're moving forward, and we're utilizing the timelines of the casinos so that we can accommodate their interest in renovating their properties in a way that is aesthetically pleasing as well as very functional. So today, for a few minutes, I'd like to go back to the sport that was initially referenced in the Gaming Act and is still a very important sport in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and that's horse racing. So I have our Director of Sports Operations, Kevin Kyle, to give a summary of his benchmark report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We've recently completed and posted on our website the 12th annual benchmark report, which provides an update to detailed statistics outlining the benefits slot machine gaming revenue provides for the horse racing industry. The Pennsylvania Racehorse Development Trust Fund continues to provide financial resources to assist the racing industry, which is funded by an assessment paid by the 12 operating casinos each day. In 2018, approximately 10% of tax revenue generated from slot machine gaming was earmarked for the fund, which amounted to over $240 million. This revenue continues to provide significantly increased purses for horsemen, awards for breeders, and funding for health and pension benefits. Total dollars wagered on Pennsylvania races declined in 2018 due to adverse weather conditions. The performance of the racing industry can be volatile due to weather conditions, and the record rainfall received last year negatively impacted overall performance indicators. Despite these results, Pennsylvania's horse racing industry is in a position to continue to remain viable due to new entertainment options within racetracks and off-track wagering facilities, with that option being the introduction of legalized sports wagering. The racetrack operators are embracing the synergies between horse racing and sports wagering and are now operating both within the same locations. Sports wagering is now operational within 3 of the 6 racetracks and at 2 of the 7 off-track wagering locations in the Commonwealth. We anticipate the number of these locations will continue to open quickly over the next several months. In addition, a portion of funding within the Pennsylvania Racehorse Development Trust Fund continues to be earmarked for marketing horse racing under the direction of the State Horse Racing Commission. This marketing effort is currently underway and provides renewed opportunities to introduce horse racing to new racing fans. We are encouraged by these new horse racing initiatives, and as the information within this new report suggests, revenue generated from slot machine gaming continues to provide an overall positive impact for Pennsylvania racing.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Thank you very much. Danette, Director of Human Resources. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman, board members. The Office of Human Resources has one motion for your consideration today relative to the hiring of 3 individuals. First, Sarah Barr has been selected as an investigator in the Bureau of Investigations Enforcement for the Eastern Region. She has completed the interview process, background investigation, and drug screening, and is recommended for hire by Director of Investigations and Enforcement, Paul Morrow. Second is Sean Dockery, who has been selected as a forensic accountant, also in the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement. He too has gone through the background process, interview, and drug screening, and is also recommended for hire by the Director of Investigations of Enforcement, Paul Morrow. And finally, Jessica Gardner, who has been selected as a licensing technician in the Bureau of Licensing, also completing all the necessary background process, and is recommended for hire by the Director of Licensing, Susan Hensel. Unless you have any questions, I would ask that the board consider a motion to approve the hiring actions as indicated.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applicants for hire as proposed by the Human Resources Director.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Thank you.
Thanks, Danette. Doug Sherman, Office of Chief Counsel.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. First before the board today are 8 petitions for your consideration. One of those was heard earlier today during the public meeting. The remaining petitions will be decided on the record by agreement of the parties. And with respect to all of these matters, the full evidentiary record and all pleadings have been provided to the board in advance of this meeting. The first petition today is from Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association, operators of Hollywood Casino. Mountain View would like to transfer a surveillance supervisor at the Hollywood Casino to a compliance specialist position at the same facility. As a result, they're requesting that the board waive the standard regulatory requirement, which, absent unique circumstances, prohibits a surveillance department employee from accepting employment as a non-surveillance worker at the same property unless 1 year has passed. In this case, expanded gambling in Pennsylvania has caused Mountain View to create a compliance specialist position. The individual for whom the waiver is sought has been selected by Mountain View for that position. And the duties of the compliance specialist will include reviewing audits, completing currency transaction reports, suspicious activity reports, background investigations, overseeing responsible gaming initiatives, and the like. Importantly, the position does not report to and is not overseen or have any overlap with the surveillance position he previously has held. Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the relief requested, and it would be appropriate for the board to consider a motion to waive the 1 year prohibition for this individual.
Thank you, Doug. Any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association LLC's petition requesting waiver of requirements regarding a surveillance department transfer as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next petition before the board is consideration of Mount Airy No. 1 LLC's request to obtain a sports wagering certificate. This matter was heard just a few minutes ago, and should the board approve the request for the certificate, to be clear, it will not be authorizing the licensee to commence the operation of sports wagering immediately, but rather sports wagering will only begin after staff has reviewed all aspects of the sports wagering area and the proposed operation, and the casino must go through a successful test period. As with all prior sports wagering petitions the board has heard, the Office of Enforcement Counsel has again requested a number of conditions on Mount Airy and its operator. These conditions will need to be fulfilled prior to commencing sports wagering operations. And finally, Mount Airy has also requested that certain portions of the record remain as confidential. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has objected in part to that request for confidentiality, and it would be appropriate for the board to issue or to consider a motion to grant the sports wagering certificate and to address the issue of confidentiality in its order.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve Mount Airy No. 1 LLC's petition for the issuance of a sports wagering certificate as described by the Office of Chief Counsel, and with the conditions to be outlined in the board's order. I further move that Mount Airy No. 1 LLC's motion for confidentiality be granted in part as will be described in the board's order.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter is Fastball Holdings LLC's request to waive qualification requirements of certain entities. Fastball Holdings is a principal affiliate of Betfair Interactive US which was issued a conditional sports wagering operator license by the board in April of this year. Betfair is contracted to offer sports wagering in conjunction with Valley Forge Casino. And Fastball holds approximately a 37% ownership interest in Betfair. The parties seeking relief in this petition are Capital G, Comcast Ventures, and NBC SV. Those entities seek a waiver of licensure of entities above them in their corporate structure. Those entities all are regulated, publicly traded companies. The indirect ownership interest that we're talking about here in Betfair are Capital G has a 4.1% indirect interest in Betfair, Comcast Ventures a 1.59% interest, and NBC SV a 3.92% interest. The companies do not hold any special voting rights other than to vote in the same manner as all other shareholders. And while Comcast Ventures and NBC SV are entitled to appoint one director to the board of Fastball, they don't have a corresponding right to appoint a director to Betfair. The entities that would avoid licensure if the board is inclined to grant the relief are Alphabet Holding LLC, 26 Holdings Inc., Alphabet Inc., formerly known as Google, Comcast CV, Comcast Holdings Corp., Comcast Corporation, NBC Universal Media, NBC Universal SC, and NBC Universal Enterprise. Fastball is requesting the board to waive the qualification requirements of these companies as their indirect ownership interest in Betfair gives them no control over that company and as a result should not be considered a principal of Betfair Interactive. But that matter is now appropriate for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Fastball Holdings LLC's petition for waiver of the qualification requirement of certain entities as described by the Office of Chief Counsel and with the conditions to be outlined in the board's order. I further move that Fastball Holdings' request for confidentiality be granted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adopted.
The petition for approval of a transfer of ownership interest of Gaming Partners International Corporation to Angel Holdings Godo Kaisha is next before the board today. Angel Holdings is seeking board approval for a merger between it and Gaming Partners International Corporation. Gaming Partners International through GPI USA and GPI Mexicana. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the relief requested, subject to conditions outlined in its answer. It's incorporated. By way of background, American Gaming and Electronics was a wholly owned subsidiary of director, and that individual has been licensed by the board. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to the request to transfer the supplier license to the new entity, and as a result, if the petition is approved, the supplier license will be transferred. All files associated with American Gaming and Electronics will be administratively closed, and technicians with the company will maintain their license. It's now appropriate for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the petition of American Gaming and Electronics, Inc. to transfer its supplier license to AG&E Holdings, Inc., as described by the Office of Chief Counsel and with the conditions to be outlined in the board's order.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter before the board is Darrell Hawkins' petition requesting removal from the board's involuntary exclusion list. In September 2015, the board placed Ms. Hawkins on the involuntary exclusion list after it was shown that in February 2015, while gaming at the Sands Bethlehem, she pinched and pass-posted bets winning $300 to which she was not entitled. She was criminally charged and permanently evicted from the Sands property. Ms. Hawkins did make full restitution to Sands and has been placed into and completed an ARD program through the court system. Her criminal record has now been expunged, and the event having been over 3.5 years ago, Ms. Hawkins is now petitioning for removal from the list. The Office of Enforcement Counsel has no objection to her removal, and that would be the motion before you.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grant Darrell Hawkinson's petition for removal from the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adopted.
The next petition before the board today is Jianchu Zhu's request for reconsideration of his placement on the board's involuntary exclusion list. At the board's May 15th meeting, the board placed Mr. Zhu on the exclusion list after he failed to respond to the Office of Enforcement Counsel's petition to place him on the list. OEC had requested that Mr. Zhu be placed on the list following an incident where his companion was observed past posting bets at the Meadows. Mr. Zhu himself did not wager, but collected his companion's winnings from the table. On May 20th of this year, Mr. Zhu sent a request to the board asking to be removed from the exclusion list and to have his matter reconsidered, stating that he was intoxicated, he was not cheating, the dealer paid him and not his friend by mistake, and he had gotten up with the money and left. The Meadows did not ask for money back from him, and he did not know what his companion had done until security had approached him. Mr. Zhu further indicated that he missed the hearing in the matter and would like an opportunity to explain the incident. As indicated, he's asking for reconsideration of that decision. Granting reconsideration would not necessarily avoid where he is now, but would rather provide him the opportunity for a hearing to explain prior to a final determination of his placement on the exclusion list, and that's what's before the board.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Jianchu Zhu's petition for reconsideration of placement on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list, and that the matter be returned to the Office of Hearings and Appeals for an evidentiary hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adopted.
The final petition before the board today is another request for reconsideration of placement on the board's involuntary exclusion list. On April 17th of this year, the board issued an order placing Alvin Seiler Jr. on the exclusion list by default after he allegedly pass-posted bets while gaming at parks, resulting in him being paid $800, to which he was not entitled. On April 25th of 2019, Mr. Seiler sent a request to the board to reconsider his placement on the list, stating that he was not properly served with notice of the enforcement action as he had moved to a different address from where the original notice had been sent. The Office of Chief Counsel has confirmed that service was at the prior address, and therefore it would be appropriate to grant him the opportunity through reconsideration to contest his placement on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Alvin Seiler Jr.'s petition for reconsideration of placement on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list, and that the matter be returned to the Office of Hearings and Appeals for an evidentiary hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adopted.
Okay, next presenting withdrawals and reports recommendations is Deputy Chief Counsel Steve Cook.
Good afternoon. The board has received several unopposed petitions to surrender credentials or withdraw applications for the following individuals and businesses: David Bonderman, Joshua Harris, Leon Black, Mark J. Rowan, James G. Coulter, Hamlet Holdings LLC, Apollo Hamlet Holdings B LLC, Apollo Hamlet Holdings LLC, Co-Invest Hamlet Holdings B LLC, Co-Invest Hamlet Holdings Series LLC, TPG Hamlet Holdings B LLC, TPG Hamlet Holdings LLC, Christopher J. Williams, John M. Bushi, Matthew James Furco, David Benjamin Sambur, Metz Concepts LLC, James Leroy Cunningham III, Maria Hedgren, Jenny Rosberg, David Suter Loudon, Frederick Erkdahl, Mark Paul Frisora, Absolute Cleaning Systems, Management Enterprises LLC, Management Enterprises Holdings LLC, MEH Manager Inc., and Kayataro Morihisi. If the board were inclined to grant these petitions, they'd be doing so without prejudice to each of these persons and entities.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board issue the orders to approve the withdrawals and surrenders as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next before the board for consideration are reports and recommendations. I would note for the record, the agenda has 4 reports and recommendations listed. However, after discussion with the board in executive session, we'll be passing over the report and recommendation related to a self-excluded individual with the initials DC. And additionally, in the matter of Marissa Tansmore, I believe the Ms. Tansmore, it was a enforcement action brought by Enforcement Council, but she has since come into compliance, so I believe Enforcement Council will be withdrawing that action. As a result, we will pass over that as well. That means we have 2 reports and recommendations for the board to consider today. In each of these matters, the complete evidentiary rate to the Steak Shack restaurant at Harrah's, Philadelphia. Mr. McClendon and his children thereafter left the restaurant, went to his vehicle, and then he returned alone to the casino, leaving his children in the car. He gamed for approximately 90 minutes before security approached him and escorted him off the gaming floor into the security area where his children were, they having left the car after he left them alone and wandered back into the casino. Although the Chester police were called and responded to the scene, no charges were filed against Mr. McClendon. Mr. McClendon did not initially respond to his petition or OEC's petition to be placed on the exclusion list, and a request for default judgment was filed. However, Mr. McClendon, just before the board could take that matter up, requested a hearing. Subsequently, hearings were scheduled on 3 or 4 occasions, with him asking for continuances on at least 2 of those occasions. Ultimately, a hearing was held on February 26, 2019. He failed to attend that hearing, and as a result, the only evidence put in was the evidence presented by OEC, which I just summarized. As a result of hearing that evidence, the hearing officer's report and recommendation recommends that Mr. McClendon, in fact, be placed on the board's exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopts the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearing and Appeals and result in that Robert McClendon be placed on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The second and final report and recommendation before the board today pertains to KT's request to be removed from the voluntary self-exclusion list. The facts of this case are that in September of 2018, KT filed her petition for removal, and as a result of this request, a hearing was held on January 31st, 2019 before the board's Office of Hearings and Appeals. The Office of Enforcement Counsel appeared at that hearing and provided testimony and evidence. KT also appeared and testified on her own behalf through the assistance of a certified board-appointed Vietnamese language interpreter. The evidence presented at the hearing established that on June 24th, 2012, KT's husband drove her to the Meadows Racetrack and Casino, where she placed herself on the lifetime self-exclusion list. KT testified that she did this after her husband threatened to divorce her if she did not place herself on the lifetime list. As a result, KT met with the casino compliance representative and did just that. The acting director of the Bureau of Casino Compliance testified at the hearing that all of the required paperwork and procedures were followed during the self-exclusion interview, that KT answered no when she was asked if she needed an interpreter, and she signed an acknowledgement form selecting the lifetime self-exclusion, which also outlined that there was no opportunity to be removed from a lifetime self-exclusion. At the hearing, KT testified that because of her somewhat limited English, she believed she was only excluding herself from the Meadows, and that she signed the documents provided to her by the casino compliance representative but did not read them. The evidence presented at the hearing also showed that 18 months later, in 2014, so 5 years prior to today, she was cited for trespassing at the Rivers Casino. KT, at that point in time, was notified that she was banned from all Pennsylvania casinos. Nevertheless, 4 years later, she filed a petition that's presently before the board. After hearing all of the evidence, the hearing officer's recommendation to the board is that KT, in fact, remain on the lifetime self-exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearing and Appeals regarding KT's petition for removal from the PGCB voluntary self-exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
That concludes the matters of the Office of Chief Counsel.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Sue.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Barish and members of the board. Before the board today will be one Category 4 slot machine license, one conditional interactive gaming manufacturer, one conditional sports wagering manufacturer, one video gaming terminal establishment, and 4 conditional video gaming terminal establishments. In addition, there will be 644 principals, key employees, and gaming and non-gaming employees. Finally, there will be the consideration of 2 certified gaming service providers and 2 registered gaming service providers. The first matter for your consideration is the approval of a Category 4 slot machine license for Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association, LLC, doing business as Hollywood Casino Morgantown. As you have heard, Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association plans to build an 85,900 square foot casino on 36 acres of land in Berks County. This is the first Category 4 license to come before the board. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation of the company, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider the order to approve the Category 4 license for Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association, LLC, doing business as Hollywood Casino Morgantown.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the Category 4 license for Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association, LLC, DBA, Hollywood Casino Morgantown, as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matters for your consideration are conditional manufacturer licenses. The first is a conditional interactive gaming manufacturer license for Spin Games, LLC. Spin Games is an interactive gaming content producer and provider based in Reno, Nevada. The second is a conditional sports wagering manufacturer license for KT Group Limited. KT Group Limited is a Hong Kong-based company that manufactures sports wagering kiosk cabinets. Under the board's regulations, interactive and sports wagering manufacturer applicants are eligible for conditional licensure if the applicants have submitted complete licensing applications and fees and the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement does not object to the issuance of the conditional licenses. These entities satisfy those criteria. I have provided you with draft orders and ask that the board consider the orders, beginning with Spin Games, LLC.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant Spin Games a conditional interactive gaming manufacturer license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
And next is KT Group Limited.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant KT Group Limited sports wagering manufacturer conditional license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, we have consideration of a VGT establishment license for CHR Corp. doing business as Rutter's Store 37. VGT establishments are truck stops seeking to place VGTs in their businesses. CHR Corp., doing business as Rutter's Store 37, was previously conditionally licensed. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has now completed its investigation, including an evaluation that the applicant meets the VGT establishment eligibility criteria. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. Once fully licensed, an establishment can continue forward toward completing the steps necessary to commence VGT gaming. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that you consider the order to license CHR Corp. doing business as Rutter's Store 37.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board?
Sue, would you just put on the record what the address of Rutter's Store number 37 is?
I do not have the address with me for Rutter's Store 37. I don't believe I have that information in my file.
It's located at 27335 Route 75 North in Mifflin Town, Walker Township, Juniata County.
Thank you.
No other questions. May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the video gaming terminal establishment license for CHR Corporation, Rudder Store number 37, as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Also for your consideration are conditional VGT establishment licenses. The applicants are Snyder's Gateway, Inc., doing business as Gateway Travel Plaza, United Refining Company of Pennsylvania, doing business as both, there are two stores here, Country Fair number 36 and Country Fair number 71, and United Refining Company of Pennsylvania, doing business as Quick Fill number 200. The board may conditionally license establishments provided the applicant has never been convicted of a felony, is current on state taxes, has submitted a completed application, and has not been convicted of a gambling law violation. A preliminary review of these applicants indicates that they meet these criteria. However, final approval will be based on the applicants meeting all eligibility criteria provided in the statute. A final eligibility determination will follow investigation and site inspection by the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement. I ask that the board consider a motion to approve the conditional VGT establishment licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grants the conditional video game terminal establishment licensees as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next for your consideration are principal and key employee licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a proposed order for 10 principals and 6 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the principal and key employee licenses as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
There are also temporary licenses for your consideration. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order regarding the issuance of temporary licenses for 10 principals and 12 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board grant the temporary principal and key employee credentials as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Additionally, there are gaming permits and non-gaming registrations. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a list of 472 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted temporary or full occupation permits, and 116 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted registrations under the authority delegated to the Bureau of Licensing. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the order.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the gaming employee occupation permits and non-gaming employee registrations as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
There are also recommendations of denial for 4 gaming employee applicants. The applicants were notified that they were being recommended for denial and failed to request a hearing within the specified timeframes. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with orders addressing each of the applicants who the Office of Enforcement Counsel has recommended for denial. I ask that the board consider the motions approving these denials.
Enforcement Council continues to request denial in each instance.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board deny the applications for gaming employee occupation permits as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
In addition, for your consideration are withdrawal requests. In each case, the license, permit, or registration is no longer required. For today's meeting, I've provided the board with a list of 1 key employee and 10 gaming employees. I ask that the board consider the orders approving the list of withdrawals.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board grant the withdrawal of a key employee applicant and gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
In addition, we have an order to certify the following gaming service providers. The Marshall Retail Group, LLC, doing business as Marshall Russo and Ruby Blue, and Aristotle International, Inc., doing business as Aristotle Integrity. I ask that the board consider the order approving these gaming service providers for certification.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approves the applicants for gaming services provider certification as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Finally, for your consideration are gaming service provider registrations. The Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order and an attached list of 2 registered gaming service provider applicants. I ask that the board consider the order registering these gaming service providers.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applications for gaming service provider registration as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
That concludes the matters of the Bureau of Licensing.
Thank you very much, Susan. Cyrus, you're on.
The Office of Enforcement Council will present 12 matters today for the board's consideration, in which we will request the board's approval of 4 revocations and 8 involuntary exclusions. The next 4 matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Council filed complaints seeking the revocation of 2 gaming employee occupation permits and 2 non-gaming registrations which were issued by the board. Each complaint has been filed with the board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the person named in each complaint. The person named in each complaint failed to respond within 30 days as required by the board's regulations. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Council filed a request for default judgment and properly served the same upon each named individual. Therefore, the facts in each complaint are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each instance, we will provide a brief summary of the facts and request the appropriate board action.
Once again, Sarah Kolesar, Kolesar, with the Office of Enforcement Council. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the gaming employee permit issued to Caitlin Conway for stealing approximately $322.25 from Lady Luck Casino during the course of her employment as a cage cashier. Ms. Conway was terminated from her employment at Lady Luck Casino and entered a guilty plea to 1 count of misdemeanor theft by unlawful taking. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Council requests that the board revoke the gaming employee permit issued to Caitlin Conway.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the revocation of Caitlin Conway's gaming employee occupation permit as requested by the Office of Enforcement Council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Chairman, members of the board, John Crowe, CROHE, again for the Office of Enforcement Council. The next matter for the board's consideration is the revocation of the non-gaming employee registration held by Matthew Doyle, who on January 22nd, 2019, pleaded guilty to felony possession with intent to deliver. The Office of Enforcement Council now requests that the non-gaming employee registration held by Matthew Doyle be revoked.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Matthew Doyle's non-gaming employee registration as requested by the Office of Enforcement Council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Good afternoon, Thomas Monahan, Monaghan, with the Office of Enforcement Council. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the non-gaming registration issued to Theodore Sepkoski. On November 9th, 2018, Mr. Sepkoski pled guilty to first-degree felony robbery for robbing a Turkey Hill convenience store. At this time, OEC requests that the board revoke the non-gaming registration issued to Theodore Sepkoski.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Theodore Sepkoski's non-gaming employee registration as requested by the Office of Enforcement Council.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the gaming employee permit issued to Johnny Yang. While working as a table games dealer at Sugar House Casino, it was discovered that Mr. Yang was previously terminated by American Casino for his involvement in a cheating conspiracy while working as a table games dealer. Mr. Yang failed to disclose this termination or its reason to the PGCB or Sugar House. At this time, OEC requests that the board revoke the gaming employee permit issued to Johnny Yang.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Johnny Yang's gaming employee occupation permit as requested by the Office of Enforcement Council.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The remaining matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Council filed petitions seeking the involuntary exclusion of individuals whose presence in a licensed facility are inimical to the interests of the Commonwealth and are licensed gaming therein. In each instance, the petition for exclusion has been filed with the board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in the petition. The individual named in the petition failed to respond within 30 days as required by board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment in each instance and properly served the same upon each individual. Therefore, all facts in each petition are deemed admitted. All filed documents have been provided to the board, and the matters are presently ripe for the board's consideration. In each instance, if the board orders a proposed exclusion, each individual's photo, personal identifiers, and a summary of the inimical conduct will be placed on the board's public website.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Dean Giacomantonio on the board's involuntary exclusion list. On December 8th, 2018, Mr. Giacomantonio was a patron at the Meadows when he inappropriately touched two cocktail waitresses. When confronted, he made violent threats towards security and police. Mr. Giacomantonio was charged by the Pennsylvania State Police for his actions. At this time, OEC requests that the board place Dean Giacomantonio on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Chairman, I move the board approve the addition of Dean Giacomantonio to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adopted.
Next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Julia Jones on the board's involuntary exclusion list. On October 5th, 2018, Ms. Jones printed and cashed a voucher that belonged to another patron worth $889 at Rivers Casino. Ms. Jones was issued a lifetime ban from Rivers and criminally charged by the Pennsylvania State Police for her actions. At this time, OEC requests that the board place Julia Jones on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the addition of Julia Jones to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Tony Vo on the board's involuntary exclusion list. On August 21st, 2018, Mr. Vo cheated by capping and pinching wagers on at least 9 occasions while playing mini baccarat at the Meadows Casino. Mr. Vo is permanently banned from the Meadows and criminally charged by the Pennsylvania State Police for his actions. At this time, OEC requests that the board place Tony Vo on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the addition of Tony Vo to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adopted.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the board. Benjamin Farrell, F-E-R-R-E-L-L, Assistant Enforcement Counsel for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter for your consideration is a petition to place Larry Harbour on the exclusion list. Mr. Harbour colluded with the table game supervisor at Harris Philadelphia Casino and Racetrack to receive false player ratings and as a result received $15,460 in unlawful financial benefits. Mr. Harbour was criminally charged. At this time, OEC requests that the board issue an order placing Larry Harbour on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Larry Harbour to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is adopted.
The next matter for consideration is a petition to place Rose Molina on the exclusion list. Ms. Molina left her 13-year-old grandson unattended in her vehicle while gaming at Harris Philadelphia Casino and Racetrack. Harris Philadelphia permanently evicted Ms. Molina. At this time, OEC requests the board issue an order placing Rose Molina on the involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board deny the Office of Enforcement Counsel's request to add Rose Molina to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adopted.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barish, members of the board. Dustin Miller on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is a request to place Kurt Carilla on the exclusion list. On July 9th, 2018, Mr. Carilla engaged in a verbal confrontation with a female patron and River security personnel, which escalated it to a physical confrontation with security officers and Pennsylvania State Police. Rivers issued a permanent ban to Mr. Carilla, and Pennsylvania State Police filed criminal charges against him due to his actions. Mr. Carilla pled guilty to terroristic threats, resisting arrest, indecent exposure, criminal mischief, disorderly conduct, harassment, and public intoxication, and was sentenced to 2 years of probation and ordered to have no contact with Rivers Casino during that period. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests the placement of Kurt Carilla on the PGCB's exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Kirk Carilla to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barish, members of the board. David Tepper, TEPPER, on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda is a request to place Jason McDermott on the involuntary exclusion list. While a patron at Parks, Mr. McDermott passed a counterfeit $100 bill and was in possession of methamphetamine and related items consistent with packaging, storage, and distribution. As a result of his conduct, Mr. McDermott was criminally charged, and at this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board add Jason McDermott to the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approves the addition of Jason McDermott to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Ashley Gabriel, GABRIELLE, Assistant Enforcement Counsel with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is a petition seeking the exclusion of Jesse A. Robinson, Jr. Between June 2013 and July 2018, Mr. Robinson stole players' cards issued to other patrons and engaged in gaming activity using the free play that was loaded onto them at Valley Forge Casino Resort and Sugar House casinos. Mr. Robinson also violated a permanent eviction from Sugar House at least 7 times. In December 2017, as part of criminal charges stemming from an incident at Sugar House, the sentencing order entered by the Municipal Court of Philadelphia imposes an area of restriction order to include all Sugar House casino properties and surrounding areas. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board exclude Jesse A. Robinson, Jr.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Jesse A. Robinson, Jr. to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thank you. That concludes our business.
Thank you very much. As we've previously scheduled, this is an opportunity, a public comment period where people should have registered before. As I understand it, we don't have anybody, no members of the public who are currently registered to speak today. Therefore, that will conclude today's meeting. The next public meeting will be held on Wednesday, July 10th at 10 a.m. in this room. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned. The motion